Pope Francis speaks at an interfaith rally in the ancient city of Ur, the birthplace of the prophet Abraham. The pontiff using the occasion to call for unity between people of all faiths. The United Nations urges protesters and police in Senegal to refrain from violence. Deadly unrest continuing in the country after the main opposition leader was arrested this week. And Brazil is facing its worst phase of the pandemic yet. But as cases and deaths surge in the country, the far-right president refuses to impose nationwide social distancing measures. And we begin with Pope Francis finishing an address before an interfaith rally in the ancient Iraqi city of Ur, what is believed to be the birthplace of the prophet Abraham. The pontiff drew on the significance of the location to say, regardless of whether people are Muslim, Jewish, or Christian, they are all sons and daughters of Abraham. This is the first ever papal visit to Iraq and comes amid a second wave of coronavirus infections. Authorities had posed a full lockdown during the trip, and it was a noticeably smaller audience than one might normally see on a Pope's foreign visit. But it also comes amid high security concerns in the country. Let's take a listen to the Pope speaking earlier.
Terrorism has destroyed in barbaric ways part of all the religious heritage of this very country. Monasteries, places of faith that belong to various religions in this country have been destroyed. But despite the darkness, there have been shining lights of bright stars of the young people of Mosul who rebuilt monasteries and churches in the region. They built the bonds of fraternity that broke down the bonds of hatred. Together they stood with each other to rebuild churches and mosques in the area.
Well, for more, we can speak to our international affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Hello, Doug.
Hello.
We heard the Pope addressing Muslims, Jews, Christians, but also people from non-Abrahamic religions, Yazidis and Sabians as well in that address. This is a theme he's been pushing throughout his visit, one of unity.
And not just throughout this visit. This has been the cornerstone of this Pope's papacy, has so far been this interfaith outreach. Yes, he is obviously the head of the flock of 1.3 billion Catholics around the world. That's his official function and duty as Pope. But he also sees himself as a messenger across faiths, someone who is there to try to foster interfaith dialogue in an age that has seen horrific violence and extremism and lurches towards terrorism. As he spoke this morning in Ur about barbaric acts that have destroyed, in Iraq's case, their proud heritage, their religious sites, the very place he was speaking. Ur itself, a big archaeological site which used to draw tons of tourists back in the 70s and 80s, but basically no one's been coming in recent years from the outside because of the very things I was just talking about, the war and terrorism and conflict. So yes, this is a Pope who has come to, at a very unlikely time, against the advice of many people, including some Vatican officials who thought it was just simply too dangerous. You do not go to Iraq at this moment in history with a pandemic and violence still rife. But this Pope said, absolutely not. The whole reason I am Pope, my reason of being Pope is exactly this type of opportunity. And within this trip, this particular event, perhaps almost more than any other, this interfaith dialogue with not just Sunnis and not just Shias, but also, as you said, Sabians were in the audience, Yazidis, another horribly persecuted, slaughtered, actually, ethnic minority at the hands of ISIS in Iraq. Representatives of those denominations were sitting in that audience, a very pared-down audience, as you said, because of the coronavirus pandemic and the health precautions. But this Pope determined to be there. Yeah, he was sitting down. Sure, he's a fragile Pope. He's 84 years old. He has a sciatica condition. He came limping off the plane. But even albeit his advancing age, his fragile condition, he was determined as ever to be there and to deliver this message in this particular place at this particular time.
Really underscoring why it's such a historic visit. Now, Doug, give us an idea of what the state of Christianity, what the state of Catholicism is in Iraq.
dwindling and disappearing, as we've been saying. Among all the persecuted religions in Iraq over the past decades, the Christian community, as we know, has been persecuted, has had property seized. They've been fleeing. Those who couldn't flee abroad to places like the U.S. and Canada, or to temporary, refuge in places like Turkey and Jordan, have taken refuge inside the country, in the north of the country, in Iraqi Kurdistan, and elsewhere. Right now, the Christians, we keep giving different numbers. It seems each day there's like some different estimate, depending on the way you count. But roughly, it's fair to say anywhere from, say, 300,000 at a lower end estimate up to 500,000. That's the entire Christian community. But when we talk about Christian communities in Iraq, we're talking about maybe a dozen or so different rites, different traditions. Obviously, the Catholics are the biggest among them. There's about 250,000 Catholics. They're not exactly the same Catholics as a lot of the Pope's flock in Rome, or when he gives his Mass at the Vatican. They are Chaldean Catholics who, yes, follow the Holy See, follow Rome, but they actually have their own liturgy, their own ancient liturgy dating back thousands of years. And basically it's in the language, Aramaic, that Jesus is said to have spoken. So they're very, very proud, the Chaldean Catholics, of their own ancient rites, but they do adhere to the Pope's message and the Pope's church as well. There's also Syriac Catholics, which are within, they're also Catholics, slightly different, lesser numbers of them, about 45 to 50,000, once again, depending how you count. But we're talking really a tiny, tiny fraction within Iraq's overall mosaic and tapestry of religions, where Sunnis and Shia Muslims really represent 98%, or perhaps even more, of Iraq's religious makeup. So within the Christian community, already a tiny fraction, tiny fraction. You have the Catholics, even a tinier fraction therein.
All right. Thank you very much, Doug. Douglas Herbert, our international affairs commentator. And Saturday began with the Pope seeing the top Shiite cleric. On Sunday, the Pope will travel to the predominantly Sunni Muslim city of Mosul. Now, it has a strong Christian heritage, but much of that was destroyed in the war against the Islamic State group. Our correspondent sent us this report.
Al-Sa'ar Church in the heart of Mosul's old city. Its master is Father Olivier Poquillon, a French Dominican. He lived here between 2003 and 2004, then returned in 2019. Mosul may be majority Sunni, but this rooftop view reminds us of its Christian history.
À l'origine, tout ça c'était un quartier chrétien. Donc ici, on voit les croix de l'église Saint-Thomas. Derrière, il y a l'église Mesquinta. Et là, on a Al-Tahira syriaque, Al-Tahira chaldéenne.
The Islamic State group occupied the city from 2014 to 2017. These buildings were then looted, desecrated, destroyed.
Les croix ont été enlevées. Alors les coupoles sont encore debout. Finalement, on a de la chance. C'est ce qu'on se dit en étant ici par rapport à d'autres églises. On s'en est quand même assez bien tiré, puisque Daesh a utilisé ce lieu, ce qui nous a permis de le récupérer assez abîmé, mais pas détruit.
The emblems of the Islamic State group still remain. These men, supported by UNESCO, are working to remove them before the arrival of the Pope.
Second floor, first floor are not cleared.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mine clearance is still ongoing, and many remnants of the war are still found here.
That we have found in the prior house, this explosive bolts. Here we have guns, hand grenades, pistols.
A chapter in the church's history that its guardian is happy to see end. He is one of several dozen Christians in Mosul today, a far cry from the 45,000 who lived here before 2003.
قسم من المسيحيين ما رجعوا من مناطقهم، من مناطق اقليم كردستان خوفا ماكو عندنا تفرقه كانه احنا في زمن قبل 2003.
This Christian and these Muslims hope that their efforts and the Pope's visit will encourage religious minorities to return. Until then, they will work together to preserve what is left of their heritage.
A look at other world news, and Senegal's interior minister vowed to use any means necessary for a return to order. The country saw a third day of violent protests after the main opposition leader was arrested on Wednesday. 4 people have died during this week's unrest. This in a country known for its stability. Jean-Emile Jamin reports.
Thousands have demonstrated since Ousmane Sonko, one of Senegal's opposition leaders, was arrested this week. The lawmaker, whose immunity was stripped, is accused of rape. Sonko says the charges are fabricated to disqualify him from the next presidential vote. His supporters believe President Macky Sall is targeting potential opponents so he can run for a third term, even though that is banned by the Constitution.
Aujourd'hui, ce que nous vivons dans ce pays-là, vraiment, c'est incroyable. C'est honteux. C'est honteux. Macky nous a décidé. Macky a décidé. L'Afrique, Sénégal était un pays exemplaire.
Friday, for the third straight day, protesters clashed with security forces, some looting stores. The deadly unrest is the worst seen in Senegal in decades. The UN has called to de-escalate tension, saying demonstrators should remain peaceful and authorities must allow protests. Access to social media has been disrupted. Authorities accuse Sonko of being behind an insurrection, vowing to arrest those taking part in the unrest.
Il convient de relever, de regretter et de condamner fermement les actes de nature terroriste, les voies de fait, les saccages, les pillages et dégradations de bâtiments publics et de biens privés.
Ousmane Sonko will remain in police custody throughout the weekend. He is due in court again on Monday.
Now to Brazil, where a second wave of COVID-19 is infecting and killing more people in the country than at any time since the pandemic began. The world's second worst affected nation recorded more than 75,000 new cases, along with 1,800 deaths in the past 24 hours. But President Jair Bolsonaro remains opposed to nationwide social distancing measures. Alexander Alcott has more.
The over-60s in Rio de Janeiro formed queues 7 kilometres long to get vaccinated as a brutal second wave of COVID-19 takes Brazil's daily death toll higher than at any point during the pandemic. Fearing there wouldn't be enough doses to go round, many started lining up in the middle of the night.
A hora que eu cheguei foi 4 horas da manhã. O que eu estou achando dessa fila? Absurdo.
Eu cheguei 3 horas da manhã aqui com meu pai, sou moradora, residente aqui do 4º distrito de Xerém. Ele não vai poder ser vacinado, porque a gente não está no sistema de carro, não tem carro.
The current 14-day moving average is 1,250 COVID-19 fatalities per day, and there are calls for urgent action as it continues to rise. Rio, under its own initiative, has introduced a curfew from 11 p.m. till 5 a.m. and ordered bars, restaurants and clubs to limit their hours. But nationwide social distancing measures are unlikely due to the ongoing resistance of President Jair Bolsonaro, who earlier this week told Brazilians to, quote, stop whining, following 2 straight days of record deaths. And even as Brazil's vaccination campaign gets off to a late start, the head of the World Health Organization warned the jabs alone won't be enough.
The situation in Brazil is very, very concerning. While doing everything to roll out vaccines, but in the whole country, aggressive use of the public health measures, social measures, will be very, very crucial.
State governors and doctors have complained that Bolsonaro's government has downplayed and mismanaged the pandemic, and the hospital system is now reaching breaking point. Of particular concern is a new variant from the Amazon region that appears more contagious and better able to infect those who've already had the virus.
And finally, NASA has released images after the Mars rover Perseverance successfully conducted its first test drive on the red planet. Scientists said the exercise went, quote, incredibly well and represented a huge milestone for the mission. The 6-wheeled rover traveled about 6.5 meters in 33 minutes. It's on a mission to search for signs of past life on Mars. Engineers are studying possible routes for longer trips and also preparing for the first flight of a helicopter drone carried by the rover. Well, that's the news for now. Thank you for watching. Please stay tuned to France 24.